Detective Helen Grus has been the subject of an over 2 years long investigation by the Ottawa Police Service after she uncovered missing details in files of sudden infant deaths following the COVID-19 vaccine rollout. The prosecution argues that she acted for personal reasons without authorization and bypassed her chain of command in this investigation or this probe, while defense maintains Grus was using her discretion as a police officer to preserve life and uphold community safety. The final day of the disciplinary tribunal for Ottawa Police Service Detective Helen Grus was heard virtually on Thursday, January 14th. The majority of previous proceedings were held strictly in person at the Huntmar Police Station on the outskirts of Ottawa, Ontario. At the time that the charges against Grus were launched, she was a detective in the Sexual Assault and Child Abuse, that's SACA, unit. It's mandated to thoroughly investigate all instances of death in children under the age of 5. Grus, a dedicated officer whose progress reports detailed an exemplary record, is accused of discreditable conduct after accessing Ottawa Police's digital records management system called RMS to probe what she had heard from her colleagues as troubling pattern of increased infant deaths, double, perhaps even triple the usual numbers. This was following the rollout of the rushed-to-market novel modified RNA COVID-19 injections. Grus had repeatedly been expressing concerns about the way in which COVID-19 and its response was being handled, including the lack of evidence and data to support the harshly and strictly imposed government mandates, including vaccine mandates. For the crime of expressing herself as freely as professionally possible, Grus was forbidden by her superiors from discussing COVID-19 related issues in the workplace. On the final day of the hearing, Grus's lawyer, Bathsheba Vandenberg, argued that Grus acted in good faith and within her police duties in attempting to look at infant deaths following the rollout of these novel vaccines or injections. Vandenberg emphasized that Grus was justified in calling a victim's father to explore a possible connection between the two things, noting that the call was appropriate, cordial, and aligned with police duties, as confirmed by ethics expert Staff Sergeant Peter Daniluk in one of his testimonies. The defense also asserted that Grus did not undermine the chain of command as she informed an ad hoc superior about the probe and repeatedly expressed concern with what she was hearing, being told, and seeing for herself in the data. The issue would have remained an internal police matter if not for a media leak from the Ottawa Police Service to CBC journalist Shamini Yogaratnam. Vandenberg argued that the leak, not Grus's actions, sparked public concern and undermined the police's reputation. She pointed out the similar verbiage between the CBC articles and the charges against Grus, which she asserts were based on outlandish rumors, not evidence. Vandenberg also highlighted the professional standards unit and their handling of the case, including cold calling the parents of these deceased infants about a non-existent privacy breach, even though no complaints were ever launched against Grus or made to the privacy commissioner following fellow officers' recommendations to those parents to do so. Vandenberg asserts that this behavior should have been reprimanded in the same way that Grus is, and emphasized the principle of all for one and one for all in policing. With mounting medical and investigative concerns, defense maintains that Grus was alarmed by the increase in sudden infant deaths in Ottawa, had been told by her colleagues that the mothers and or the babies themselves, in some of these cases, had in fact been vaccinated with this novel injection, and died in circumstances that were not only unusual, but similar to Pfizer's own clinical trial data, which was only released through court order after the pharma oligarch tried to bury it for 75 years. Vandenberg argued that the evidence compiled on a USB stick by Grus could very well support a case of criminal negligence, which should have been investigated to either rule out or confirm such negligence, but instead, Grus was the one put on trial. This, even though she was due to be promoted to sergeant, with her character, professionalism, and integrity repeatedly praised throughout various performance reports, where she was described as a valuable asset to the SACA unit with an exemplary work ethic, showing dedication to public safety, and serving as a mentor to less experienced colleagues. Defense argued that Grus's right to freedom of expression was infringed upon by her superiors when she was restricted from discussing anything related to COVID-19 in the workplace, and then suspended following this media leak, which publicized confidential and legitimate police work. In final closing submissions, Vandenberg warned of political influence in Grus's charges, given the sensitive nature of government officials at the highest level, like the Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, the media, and institutions like Canada's National Advisory Committee on Immunization, called NACI, not only endorsing but strongly encouraging the COVID-19 vaccines, especially for pregnant and breastfeeding women. But once again, Vandenberg pointed to clinical trial data showing infant deaths and statements that contradict this in the Vaccines Product Monograph as evidence that the official narrative was at odds with the facts. In conclusion, the defense maintained that Grus acted within her legal and ethical rights and should be cleared of any wrongdoing. Justice is truth in action, Vandenberg said. Thereafter, prosecutor Jessica Barrow argued that Detective Grus's actions were inappropriate and undermined the chain of command. Barrow claimed that Grus improperly used the RMS resource and stated that police cannot access the database when or how they want. Barrow gave various examples in her arguments, but none of them pertained to detectives doing police work within their own unit, which Grus was. Barrow further argued that Grus did not properly communicate her investigation to her superiors, which undermined this chain of command, and she refuted the defense's claim that Grus was doing quality control. That is, Barrow claimed Grus was specifically trying to connect the vaccines to the deaths, not probing to see if details were missing or if each case had been properly investigated, which the record showed at least a few hadn't been. In the most glaring instance, Detective Stewart, one of Grus's colleagues, closed her first ever SIDS investigation within 24 hours and without the coroner's report being submitted. Barrow claimed that Grus gave inconsistent testimony, particularly in her affidavit where she claimed that there were probable and reasonable grounds for a criminal investigation into these deaths to take place. Barrow says Grus didn't have the authority to pursue such an inquiry. And it was repeatedly heard that Grus actually knew that, but she felt it necessary to compile an evidentiary report to proceed, something that was abruptly halted when she was suspended in February of 2022. The prosecution argued that Grus's actions could be seen as discreditable to the force, and it was insisted that objective actions which could damage the reputation of the police service from the perspective of the community should be the only considered grounds for the charge of discreditable conduct. On the chain of command and oversight, Barrow stressed that Grus, as an experienced and seasoned officer, knew she was required to seek authorization for such investigations. She argued that no investigation of this magnitude should occur without proper oversight from superiors, and that Grus's failure to follow this protocol and chain of command was a serious breach. In summary, Barrow's arguments centered on Grus's alleged failure to communicate and follow alleged proper procedures, claiming she improperly used police resources. Barrow referred to all other evidence laid out by the defense as irrelevant and appeared to stroke the tribunal hearing officer Chris Renwick's ego by calling on him to trust his expertise and experience in policing for his decision by giving little to no merit to the arguments presented by the defense. At the very last minute, Renwick opted to enter one of Grus's duty books into the exhibit, notably her January 30th, 2022 notebook, of which only a redacted copy has been provided to the defense. Renwick has apparently seen an original photocopy provided by the prosecution, but not that physical original, so time will tell if this has any relevant information about Grus's note-taking records. Also worth noting is that Grus's alleged discreditable conduct was so severe that she has continued working in the force, now in the robbery unit, since October of 2022. Renwick said that his decision will be published virtually on the OPS website in the coming weeks. For Rebel News, I'm Tamara Ugolini. Before the switch to virtual hearing for the final conclusion of the tribunal proceedings, everything was held in person, and I had to travel to Ottawa and stay overnight to hear for myself what exactly was going on. If you appreciate this work and would like to support it, please do so at rebelfieldreports.com. That's rebelfieldreports.com.